All right. Unit 6, day 3. We're going to kind of switch gears and we're going to solve quadratic equations. So we've already talked about one way to do that, and that is by factoring. So we can solve by factoring. The issue is not everything can be factored. So we're going to look at solving by taking square roots and solving by completing the square today. Okay? Now, first thing, solving by taking square roots. Not every equation can be solved by taking a square root. It has to be a special type of equation. Okay? It can only have one variable being squared or a binomial squared. Okay? In order to take a square root. So we have to see something like, why is my pen not working now? There we go. Has to be something like x squared only, or something like x minus 1 only, right? If we see like x squared plus 2x, right? We can't solve that by taking square roots. So we got to be careful, right? Now, what we're looking for is we're looking for perfect squared trinomials, meaning that when we factor these things, right, we get a binomial squared. So like if we go to factor x squared plus 4x plus 4, we'd be multiplying to 4, adding to 4. That'd be a 2 and a 2. So we would get x plus 2, which another way of writing that is x plus 2 squared. So we get a binomial squared. Here we'd be multiplying to 16, adding to 8. That would be 4 and 4. So x plus 4, another way of writing that is x plus 4 squared. Right, and so on. Here, be multiplying to 25, adding to negative 10, negative 5, so x minus 5. Another way of writing that is x minus 5 squared. Okay? So now, since we've created something that is a binomial squared, we can take a square root, okay? But when we take a square root of something, okay, we have to give the positive and the negative roots, okay? So we have to put plus or minus with our answer, okay? Because remember, we talked about when we solve by factoring, the highest power tells us how many answers we should have, okay? So, like if we look at this first example, x squared equals 12, okay? If we look, we only have an x squared. That's the only variable we have. So we can solve by taking a square root. So to get rid of a square, we take a square root, okay? So we get the square root of x squared is just x. And then since we took the square root, we have to include the positive and the negative root of that, right? Because remember, x squared, so this thing should have two answers, positive square root of 12, negative square root of 12, okay? Now, we just check, can we simplify the square root of 12? So going back to the day 1 stuff here, 12 is 4 times 3, right? And we can take the square root of 4. So we would say this is, square root of 4 is plus or minus 2 square root of 3 would be our simplified answer, okay? Now, with number 2, if we look, again, we just have a binomial being squared, so we can solve by taking a square root. So if we take the square root, okay, we would go x minus 3, right? The square root and the square would cancel out, equals the positive and the negative root of 20. So now, again, we look to simplify the square root of 20 if we can. So 20 we can work with is 4 times 5. So it would be x minus 3 equals plus or minus, square root of 4 is 2, square root of 5. And then to finish this up, we got to solve for x. So we're just going to add 3. Okay. And then that 3 just goes in front of that plus or minus. So 3 plus or minus 2 square root of 5 is going to be our answer there. Okay, be careful, we're not combining the 2 and the 3. The 3 goes in front of the plus or minus, okay? Now, when we get into ones like 3 here, we have a binomial being squared, right? But we've got a number hanging out front, so we've got to get rid of that number before we take a square root. So to get rid of that, it's 4 times the quantity, so we're going to divide both sides by 4. Okay, so we're going to go x minus 7 squared equals 4. Right now, we can take a square root. And the square root cancels out the square, so we get x minus 7 equals plus or minus the square root of 4, which the square root of 4 is 2. Oops. So the left side should be x minus 7. Okay, and then now we solve. So add 7. And again, we're not going to combine the 7 and the 2. We're going to say x equals 7 plus or minus 2. Okay, now these are like terms. We can combine those. There's no square root. So what we do is we split this thing into x equals 7 plus 2 and x equals 7 minus 2. So that would give us 9 and 5. Okay, so again, squared should have 2 answers, right? Now, if we look at 4, this guy's a little bit different here. If we look, this thing is, we've got x squared minus 6x plus 9 equals 4. So we can't actually take a square root because we have an x squared and an x, right? It's not just something squared. But what we look to do is we check, can we factor this left-hand side? So we would be multiplying to 9, adding to negative 6 would be a negative 3 and a negative 3. So we can make this side x minus 3 equals 4, right? Another way of writing this would be x minus 3 squared, right? So now on the left side, we do just have a binomial being squared. So now we can take a square root. Plus or minus, square root of 4 is 2. And then same thing, add the 3. So 3 plus or minus 2. We can combine those. So x plus, sorry, not x plus. X equals 3 plus 2. X equals 3 minus 2. So x is 5, or x is 1. Okay, so that's what we're going to do to solve by taking square roots. Okay, now that is leading up to solving by completing the square. Okay, so completing the square is a method we can use to create a perfect square trinomial. Okay, so what we can do is, again, if we can create something that looks like these guys that are perfect square trinomials that factor to a binomial being squared, then we can solve by taking square roots. So completing the square allows us to create that perfect square trinomial. Okay, so first thing we do is we have to make sure that the coefficient in front of the squared term is a 1. Okay, if it's not, we're going to divide the entire equation by that number. Okay, so first step, we look, the number in front of the squared term in this number 5 here is a 1. So first step is done, we're good. Okay, next step says move the constant term, so the number without a variable, to the other side of the equation. So this 18, we're going to move to the other side of the equation by adding it over. Okay, and then it says, step 3 says divide the coefficient, the number in front of x, so just x to the first power, by 2 and square it. So this number right here, we're going to take that negative 4 and we're going to divide it by 2 and we're going to square it. So negative 4 divided by 2 is negative 2, and we square it, and we get positive 4, okay? And then step 4 says add the result of step 3 to both sides of the equation. So we're going to go x squared minus 4x, and then we're going to add that 4 we just got to both sides of the equation. Okay. And then now we've completed the square. So we factor the trinomial and we solve. Okay. So to factor over here on the left side, now we're going to multiply to 4, add to negative 4. That's negative 2 and negative 2. So this left side factors to x minus 2, and then 18 plus 4 is 22. Another way of writing x minus 2 times x minus 2 is x minus 2 squared. And then now we're exactly where we were in those last examples, right? We can take a square root, have x minus 2 equals plus or minus the square root of 22. And if we add that 2 over, 2 plus or minus the square root of 22. And we can't simplify the square root of 22, so we're done. Okay, and again, 2 answers. It's a quadratic, it's squared. So 2 plus square root of 22, 2 minus square root of 22. 2 different answers, okay? For number 6, same thing, right? First step, number in front of the squared term is a 1. We're good. Move the constant over. Boom, that's already done too. So step 1 and 2, done. Step 3, take the number in front of your x term. So this time that's going to be 8. We're going to divide it by 2, and we're going to square it. So that would be 4 squared, which is 16. Okay, step 4 says we're going to take that number and we're going to add it to both sides. Equals 10 plus 16. Okay, then we factor. So multiplying to 16, adding to 8 would be 4 and 4. So we're going to go y plus 4 equals, that would be 26 over here. Another way of writing y plus 4 times y plus 4 squared. And again, now we've completed the square. We've created something we can take square roots of. So let's take the square root. So y plus 4 equals plus or minus the square root of 26. Subtract our 4. So negative 4 plus or minus the square root of 26. And we can't simplify the square root of 26. So there's our 2 answers right there. Okay? And then last couple here. If we look, first step, make sure that number in front of x squared is 1. Not a 1, it's a 3. So we've got to make it a 1. So we've got to divide everything by 3. Okay, so that would give us x squared plus 2x minus 4 equals 0. Okay, now it's a 1. So next step, move the constant over. So add that 4. Okay. Next step, take our number in front of our x term, divide it by 2, square it. So 2 divided by 2 is 1, squared is 1. Okay, so then we take that 1, and we're going to add it to both sides. Okay, and then we can factor. So here, multiplies to 1 and adds to 2 would be a 1 and a 1. So x plus 1 equals 5. Again, another way of writing that would be x plus 1 squared. So now again, take a square root. X plus 1 equals plus or minus the square root of 5. And then we subtract our 1. Negative 1 plus or minus the square root of 5. Okay, so there is our 2 answers by completing the square. Okay? And then last one here, again, make sure first the number in front of our x squared is a 1. It's not, so we're going to divide everything by that 2. So give us x squared plus 6x equals 11. Next step, move the constant over. Already done. Okay, so now we're going to take our x term, that's 6, divide it by 2 and square it. So that would be 3 squared, which is 9. We're going to add that to both sides of the equation. Okay, then we factor. So multiplies to 9, adds to 6, 3 and 3. So x plus 3, x plus 3, 11 plus 9 is 20. We could rewrite this as x plus 3 squared. Okay. Then we can take our square root. So plus or minus the square root of 20, right? We subtract 3. Oops. X equals -3 plus or minus the square root of 20. And we just check. We can simplify the square root of 20. 20 is 4 times 5. So we could say this is -3 plus or minus square root of 4 is 2. And then square root of 5. So -3 plus or minus 2 square root of 5 would be our two answers there. Okay? So, again, goal is to create something we can take the square root of. Completing the square, once you get the hang of it, it's pretty quick, pretty painless. Okay? But try out your homework. Let us know if you have any questions.